All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Congressional Roundtable discussion on book bans. My name is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. I represent the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District. Earlier this year, during Banned Books Week, I visited the Turner Free Library in Randolph, a town in my district, and I convened a roundtable and heard from community members, librarians, and educators on the need for representative literature. And this was important to me for many reasons, but especially because sometimes when you live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or in the Northeast, you can believe that you are exempt and an exception to what is happening throughout this country. It is not limited to certain states, although there are some states for whom this is more rampant. But the threat is real for all of us, and that is why I wanted to make it a point to convene that roundtable in my district, in the town of Randolph. That community conversation showed me that we needed to be having a national conversation. And so it is good to be here in the Library of Congress, the world's largest library with all of you. I'll share with you, as an only child, books were my first friend. Books were where I found refuge, community representation. And I remember as a little girl growing up in Chicago, entering one of our public libraries with my mom, and I immediately started crying. And she asked, Ayanna, what's wrong? And I said, I can't read them all. So when I say that being with all of you, I'm completely nerding out. I mean it. I appreciate each and every one of you taking time out of your schedule to participate in this convening. Each of you are on the front lines of one of the most critical fights across our nation, because the fight for books is a fight for intellectual freedom, is a fight for education, is a fight for democracy, is a fight for justice. Whether you're an organizer in Florida, where there are a record number of challenges to books, or a writer that tells stories, like my father, who's an author, that are often neglected, or a librarian committed to ensuring equitable access to books, you are doing life-saving work. I say that because I know it to be true. I truly mean it. Earlier today on the floor of the House of Representatives, I introduced legislation titled the Books Save Lives Act. The bill was drafted with the input of many of you at this table and led by my legislative director, DeMarquin Johnson, with a common goal of combating the rise in book bans. It represents an affirmative strategy to uplift the need for diverse books. While on the House floor, I spoke about Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, a book that is currently being challenged in multiple states. As a child who endured a near decade of childhood sexual abuse, I want to speak my truth. It was not until I read that book as a young girl that I realized I was not alone. And when reflecting on the most challenging chapters of my life, I recall passages to make sense of it all and move forward. So yes, books save lives. And your work in defense of books is life-saving work. That is why what's important for me in this moment is to hear from you, all of you, to learn from all of you. As quick housekeeping notes, in order for everyone to be able to share their unique insights, please limit your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. I'm talking to myself too. As a lover of books and language and words, can be a little verbose, but we have a timekeeper that will let you know when you have 30 seconds left and when it is time to conclude. As this event is being live streamed and folks may be unable to read your name placard, please begin by introducing yourself, and when you end, the person next to you at the table can jump right in. With that, let's get started. Okay, so we'll start here.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Oakley, and I'm the Senior Director for Legal Policy at the Human Rights Campaign. I use she, her pronouns. And among the things that we've been working on at HRC over the last several years are beating back the onslaught of anti-LGBTQ legislation in the states, including increasingly bans on curriculum censorship, bills including the as well as bans on what kinds of books are available in school libraries and in public libraries. The intention of our opponents who are putting these bills forward is very clear. They do not believe that LGBTQ people are something that is okay to talk about. They believe our very existence and the acknowledgement of our existence is obscene. And that is how they are justifying removing books from libraries that include any kind of reference to LGBTQ folks, LGBTQ identities, LGBTQ experiences. The list of books banned, which I'm certain other folks here are going to talk about as well, include children's books that simply have illustrations of families that have two moms. That's a favorite in my personal household where I have little kids. And it is true that some of the books that have been challenged include depictions of sexual relationships between LGBTQ folks. And those do have more mature themes and need to be treated as other books with more mature themes are. But there is nothing that is inherently obscene about LGBTQ identities. We also need to be able to see ourselves and our families reflected in the books that are in schools, in the things that teachers are allowed to discuss. And having this LGBTQ issues are among the top reasons that books are banned. And this really is feeding into the opponents of LGBTQ equality and their larger efforts to stigmatize LGBTQ communities at the same time that we're making incredible gains across the country in people's hearts and minds. We also see that we have these incredible efforts to try to make just our mere existence obscene, problematic, and something that needs to be censored, as if our very existence is in some ways threatening or hurtful. This isn't about educating people on how to become LGBTQ, of course, that is simply not a thing, but it is making sure that we're able to be represented in books and also in classrooms.
Thank you. I'm Emily Kirkpatrick, the Executive Director of the National Council of Teachers of English, otherwise known as NCTE. We will soon have our annual convention in your district, and we're looking forward to that. Just as you said, Congresswoman, book banning is happening everywhere, and the chilling effect upon teachers is a very serious concern for the long-term education of our children as well as short-term book choices. English language arts teachers are specifically prepared to select literature, to select writing prompts and other curricular decisions aimed at expanding the capacity of students to know how to communicate, to obtain critical thinking, and to see themselves in the world and see worlds beyond what they know. And when teachers are limited through direct censorship, through indirect innuendo and parent pressure and other forms of censorship, what we have is a widespread chilling effect. NCTE has specific documentation of teachers being driven out of the profession at the very time when we're struggling to have well-prepared teachers in schools. Teachers are leaving because their freedom to teach, because their disciplinary knowledge is being negated by legislation in local states that's uninformed. And it's a very, very serious issue. We operate an intellectual freedom center where we give teachers 24/7 access to support as they face censorship matters. And the need for this hotline has grown deeply over the last 2 years. Thank you for holding this roundtable.
Excellent. I'm Jeff Trexler with the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. And again, thank you, Ayanna Pressley, for hosting this. It means a lot to all of us in the comic books community because, as I'm sure you all know, and as you can see from the images behind you, comics have been at the center of challenges to books for years, and especially since the explosion of book challenges in challenges local libraries to just across the river in Virginia, where there was an attempt to have genderqueer declared obscene and illegal to distribute and to sell throughout the United States. And I want to echo what was said earlier by Kate, if we understand graphic novels are in communication through the combination of words and imagery and people, which is a new thing, particularly in schools. And if it were just trying to negotiate at a local level what specific types of particularly sexually explicit images were appropriate at different grade levels, I don't think we would be in this room. But it goes far beyond that. We're seeing at a time when people are using comics to express the fullness of American identity, we're seeing comics declared, graphic novels declared pornographic. We're seeing all graphic novels, all manga, removed from libraries and classrooms. And we're even seeing threats to librarians, teachers, and comic book retailers to have them thrown into jail. The irony of this is that it's always presented as an attempt to protect children, which is exactly the opposite of what's going on.
That's right.
Because comics are the key to 21st century literature. Combining words and images is how we communicate today. It's infographics. When we create a PowerPoint, when we storyboard a video, everything we do relies on the ability to communicate, to understand words and images working together. And even more so, comics are iconic. Comics are how we picture America in the fullness of what it is. And we look forward to working with all of you, Congressman Presley, everybody at this table, to do everything in our power to protect the freedom to express ourselves, to protect the freedom to protect America as it is.
Thank you. Good segue.
My name is Tony Medina. I am a professor of creative writing at Howard University and an author, and a native New Yorker.
I won't hold that against you. As a Bostonian, yeah.
Thank you. Casualty of the Cultural War. When you're a professor who is also a writer, you always have two trains running. At the end of each academic year, when we must show cause for our productivity as faculty, I find myself scouring my social media and the Google machine for the details of my annual literary activities to update the old CV. This is how I learned over a year ago that two of my books were banned. This one and this beautiful Love Collection. Initially, it was my graphic novel, Ayanna Pressley, about a 16-year-old black teen killed by a police officer while shopping for his first suit for his father's release from prison through DNA exoneration that was banned. I recall reeling from the incongruity of it all. I was shocked, dismayed, and strangely enough, elated. Getting my book banned was not as devastating as it seems. It's a double-edged sword. It seems that Stephen King recently said of his own banning, I must be doing something right. And getting banned alongside Toni Morrison and Art Spiegelman is a bad environment. I found articles and lists from PEN America mentioning my book as banned due to its social justice issues, among others, that were banned for themes ranging from being too woke to LGBTQ plus narratives. I immediately contacted my illustrators and editor asking if they were aware of our book being banned. They had known for 6 months, insert shock emoji, why I wasn't informed was beyond me. Nevertheless, I used my social media platforms to inform my various communities. One was a friend poet, Mariposa Convenes, who wrote an article for the Daily Codes that picked up momentum. And just last spring, on the heels of the Ayanna Pressley banning in Texas and Florida, another book of mine, Love to Langston, was banned in Florida. Love to Langston, a children's picture book biography on the life of Langston Hughes, had been a very popular, never out-of-print title for over 2 decades. This banning angered me because it was as if Langston Hughes' life story had been banned. With a grandfather who was killed alongside John Brown at Harper's Ferry, Hughes was a civil rights activist before there was a term for it. The irony of it all was that Hughes himself, the first black writer to earn a living, The silver lining is that PEN America purchased over 400 copies of Love to License, along with books by Amanda Gorman, Rio Cortez, and George Ayanna, to be given to children in Coral Gables, Florida. Organized by Books and Books Bookstore, the event featured literary luminaries such as Edwidge Donnicott, who read Love to License to a packed house. The most egregious aspect of this banning is that it was predicated solely on the objection of one parent who confessed to not having read the books in question. Book banning has been around for centuries. The Nazis burned books, and America frequently flirts with fascism as it ramps up the culture wars for a new presidential election. It's an affront to intellectualism, curiosity, and the human mind, let alone freedom. It makes me think about the rise of corrupt fascists like Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis' war against migrants, trans people, women's sovereignty over their bodies, and black history. I am also reminded of how the media pushes certain agendas such as the invasion of Iraq on manufactured evidence, and even the first Iraq war under George Bush Sr., where Americans were manipulated into espousing post-Vietnam War contradictions like, I'm against the war but for the truth. Or how now anyone critical of the Israeli government's indiscriminate bombing of Gaza is labeled an anti-Semite. And as a black writer, I cannot help but view the continual lack of diversity in Hollywood and the publishing industry as another form of banning.
It's my turn. I'd rather listen to you. Thank you so much, Congressman, for this meeting and for the long passing. As someone who lived for 18 years under one of the most savage totalitarian governments, there is not Republic of Iran, I can tell you this meeting means so much to me. And over the years I thought, okay, if this country is going fascist, where would I go next? But I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to stay here and fight.
Good.
I lived in a country where they not only harass and jail, but torture and kill poets and writers. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of strength do these men and women whose only weapon is their words, what kind of power do they have that some of the most powerful men in the world are after them? That they want them not just eliminated, but physically eliminated. Anyway, I'm not going to get too emotional. But while I was living in Iran, there was a sentence that kept coming to me from Heinrich Heine, and it is now coming back to me again, where he said, wherever they burn books, in the end they burn people. And, books alongside of women and minorities are the targets of totalitarian systems. They're the first targets. They're the canaries in the coal mine. But this challenge to those lawmakers who are banning books and for the people you mentioned, this challenge is obvious. We know what we have to do with them. But there's another challenge that I wanted to share with you and ask you, how do we deal with that? The other challenge is what one of the best poets of 20th century, Joseph Brodsky said. He said, worse than burning books is not reading them. And the great Ray Bradbury talked about how burning books is not the only way to destroy a culture. All you have to do is to get people not to read. So I think we need to get into this conspiracy of getting the American people, but especially our young people. My focus is the schools and universities right now. How to get them to read books, how to get them to understand that they want to be free. Freedom comes with responsibility. Freedom comes with accountability. So you are responsible for the crimes you haven't committed, like banning books.
My debut, Melissa, released in 2015, won the Stonewall and Landville Literary Awards and has been published in 16 languages. It was one of the first traditionally published books with a trans character for 8 to 12-year-olds and the first by a trans author. It was also the number 5 most banned and challenged book according to the American Library Association in 2016. In 2017, it was number 3, and number 1 in 2018 for American Name Career Journals. I'm going to disagree. It's not an honor for me. It's a limit of access to the kids who need a limit of access of information to the kids who need to research. The books that are banned and challenged serve as a spotlight on the issues that the larger culture is wrestling with. And I'm using a large definition of censorship that includes soft censorship and any kind of limit of access to stories and information. Books that explore queerness and racism dominate the lists, and children are being used as a proxy in a culture war. And right now, books by Palestinians and Palestinian Americans are in that hot seat. A couple went to a public library in New York City and took out half a dozen children's books about Palestine and has announced that they don't plan to return them. A single patron can wipe out an entire culture out of the library's children's section, and that terrifies me. Humanity is narrative. Statistics and data are important, but humans are moved by emotions, and emotions come from stories. Individual people and situations, and seeing the connections between us all. When you take away stories, you dehumanize people. Kids are learning about the world, and they deserve to know who's here, whether it's about finding themselves or about growing into a person who sees others for who they are. The alternative is an adult who is not prepared to be part of the beautiful, diverse culture that they are part of. I'm a storyteller, so let me tell you a very brief story. Narrative, right? Okay. So imagine a late night alley. It is street light, it's flickering in and out, it is drizzling, for ambiance. And there's this dude who's like super drunk, ping-ponging his way home on that alley. Like PBR drugs. Right? I'm using some stereotypes here. He is a Jew bro. His name is Bryce. And in the other direction, he sees someone who he identifies as trans. And he goes, that's a trans woman! Hey, just like Melissa! Oh my gosh, Miss Roberts said that story to us, and then we had lunchtime, and it was so much fun. And he goes home, and she goes home. And if you weren't worried about her safety, you live in a cisgender privilege that I do not. Because people are at risk. And yeah, books do save lives. Books save queer lives, books save black lives, books save Palestinian lives, books save lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alex.
My name is Ellen O. I'm a founding member and CEO of Really Diverse Books, and we are dedicated to helping all children see themselves in the pages of the book. We represent and support diverse creators and diverse stories. Do you know that when we formed in 2014, less than 7% of the books being published in children's literature that year were by and about BIPOC? That is a true statistic. And in the almost 10 years of our existence, we've changed that number. The last check we did was about 40% of books published in children's publishing were by BIPOC authors. That is a huge change, something that we wanted to celebrate, a 5-fold change. And that was directly in unison with the programs that we worked on so hard. But now we can't celebrate that, because in the last couple of years, thousands of diverse books have been stripped from schools and libraries across the country. These are fueled by extremist groups under the guise of parental rights. These book challenges have disproportionately targeted titles for BIPOC and LGBTQ+ authors, and they are many of them who are supported by WNDB since our founding. The effect of the censorship has been chilling. Diverse authors are losing their livelihoods. Educators are reporting increased harassment, even termination. But it's the kids and teens in our communities who are facing the most harm. BIPOC and LGBTQ+ children have some of the highest rates of attempted suicide in the country. When they lose access to diverse books, they learn a powerful lesson that their stories, that their lives just don't matter. And we're not here to protect them. We cannot fail these kids. This is why WNDB established our book Save Lives initiative last year to fight against censorship. And this is why we do so well there's going to be a sharp change in what happens. From the extremes of lack of representation to the highs that we've had, publishing is cyclical. And so everything that's happening now will affect the books that will come out in the next few years. And only our children, not only our children, all of us actually will suffer. But we must think of our children most importantly. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stefana Farrell. I am a mom of 2 public school-age kids, and I am one of the founding members of Florida Freedom to Read Project, and I am honored to be here today. I come from a state that is leading the nation. Over 2,400 titles have been called into question over the last 2 years. Not everything has been removed. We have had some wins, but now we face not only objections, which have primarily been by 4 people in our state, but we now face internal reviews that are either removing books permanently or aging books up and out of our elementary schools. We're seeing middle grade titles move to middle schools. In middle schools, we're seeing YA moved up to high schools or restricted to the higher grades. We represent thousands of parents in Florida that are very concerned about protecting student access to diverse books. Tony's book was Love to Langston, was one of 3 picture books that were moved up to middle school level. And then also The Hill We Climb was moved out of K through 5 access in the resource section and moved to grades 6 through 8, where the students had to prove they read at a 5th grade reading level to be able to access the books. It is very scary because we live in a state where we have people that are not acknowledging the impacts of our laws, that can publish a list of books that have been permanently removed from our schools, but then still say we're not banning books and we're not denying access. We have many, many media specialists and teachers. My own 2 sons do not have classroom libraries right now. Even though my district spent over $400,000 this summer trying to approve the classroom library books that teachers had submitted, spent $400,000, didn't make it halfway through the list, and my teachers were still too afraid to put classroom libraries out for my students. Because any one person, not even a parent in the classroom, but some community member could say that book that's on the shelf is inappropriate for this age group and challenge that teacher's certificate, risking their livelihood to offer my kids books in the classroom to read. And so I don't blame the teachers, I don't blame the principals, I don't blame my district that spent $400,000 this summer in an unfunded mandate for the lack of access. I blame the state, I blame the laws, and we need help, and so I do appreciate this act, and thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for hosting this roundtable. I'm Deborah Caldwell-Stone. I'm Director of the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom. And as you know, our mission at the American Library Association is to provide leadership for the development, promotion, and the improvement of library services, and to ensure access to reading for all. And an important component of that mission is defending the right to read freely and highlighting the harms of censorship for everyone. For over 4 decades, we have provided support for library workers dealing with censorship in their libraries, collected and shared data on book bans, sponsored Banned Books Week, and initiated grassroots advocacy campaigns like Unite Against Book Bans. Every day, over 360,000 library professionals in every community across America work to promote literacy, provide access to information, and introduce children to the joy of reading. Our work is rooted in the promises of the First Amendment and the founders' vision of individual liberty. The freedom to read is central to our mission and promoting the work of libraries. We are alarmed, distressed, and angered by an increasing trend to censor reading choices in libraries around the country, both public libraries and school libraries. In 2022, our Office for Intellectual Freedom tracked the highest number of demands to ban books reported since we began compiling data over 2 decades ago. The 1,269 reported demands to censor books in 2022 doubled the 729 challenges in 2021, and the 2,571 unique titles that were targeted for censorship in 2022 was a 38% increase from the 1,858 unique titles targeted for censorship in 2021. And the vast majority of these books are books dealing with the lives and experiences of LGBTQIA persons and BIPOC persons. In addition to the attempts to censor individual books, we're tracking several state and local government initiatives that would undermine the freedom to read in local communities or criminalize the very practice of librarianship. We oppose book bans for the following reasons. Clearly, they're unconstitutional and an affront to the founders' vision of individual liberty and the reader's right to receive information. The First Amendment protects the individual's right to receive information, including a student's right to access information in the school library. As public institutions governed by the First Amendment, libraries cannot, should not restrict or remove books or other resources because someone dislikes or disapproves of the viewpoints expressed in those works. And book bans are absolutely unnecessary. Existing professional standards for acquiring a variety of materials to meet users' developmentally appropriate information needs and interests are the core of librarians' missions. Librarians are trained, they hold master's degrees, and they do their work in accordance with written policy and the Constitution. And research shows that the opportunity to select from a wide range of books impacts children's ability to succeed in their educational endeavors. And finally, we believe that parents are best suited to determine which books are appropriate for their own children. Not other groups, not other parents. It should be the parent who guides their students' reading, and they can do that with the assistance of librarians who are anxious to do that work. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here, Congresswoman. It is such an honor to be here with you and my colleagues here at the round table. My name is Patrick Cochran. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the Advocacy and Policy Engagement Manager at PFLAG National. PFLAG is the largest organization for LGBTQ plus people and those who love them. We support families, educate allies, and advocate for equality through our network of hundreds of thousands of members and supporters and hundreds of chapters across the country. The last several years, though, have been extremely hard. There have been legislative attacks on trans youth and their families, bans on honest and accurate information, and anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric leading to real-world violence in our communities. We have also seen, of course, a well-funded and coordinated effort to ban books and inclusive education from schools and public libraries, often because they have LGBTQ plus characters or themes, or because they shed light on the realities of racism. In 2021, though, PFLAG National created Read with Love, a program that provides ways to organize locally, encourages banned book donations, and supports Read with Love In events, which is our form of read-ins. Advocacy against book bans and support of keeping books on the shelves and inclusive, accurate education in schools is a critical component of Read with Love, as well as advocating for federal legislation like the Book Saves Lives Act is another way that we can all move closer to PFLAG's vision of an equitable, inclusive world where every LGBTQ plus person is safe, celebrated, empowered, and loved. I do want to share a statement from one of our parents. Mindy Freeman is a mom from the Philadelphia area who has been a tireless advocate for her trans daughter and a leading voice against censorship, even testifying before Congress. She asked me to read this to the group to bring a parent voice to the conversation. My family and I are fighting for books because it was Melissa, a book about a transgender fourth grader that helped us understand the journey that we embarked on with our daughter. And it was one of Lily's teachers who encouraged us to read it, which wouldn't have happened today because Melissa is a frequently challenged book and teachers are afraid to have it on their shelves. Books did not turn my daughter trans, just like it didn't turn her eyes from brown to blue. So I stand right behind my youngest child with both feet and fight book bans in our Philadelphia suburbs by marching to the front of our local school board, defending students just like my own daughter, and by delivering donated banned books to small public libraries where we hope someone who needs a book like Melissa can come and read it. My daughter Lily was in 5th or 6th grade when I attended my first PFLAG meeting. Their work is always leading with love. When you walk into PFLAG, it's a non-judgmental place where they support LGBTQ individuals and those who love them. My daughter is in high school now, and I've attended countless PFLAG meetings over the years. I still don't have all the answers, but I'll have a better chance finding them as long as I keep leading with love. Thank you for allowing me to share Mindy's words, for including PFLAG National in this conversation today, and thank you so much, Congresswoman, for leading with love on behalf of your constituents in this important matter.
Thank you. My name is Laura Schroeder, she, her, hers. I lead our congressional advocacy for PEN America. Thank you, Congresswoman, for convening us here today on this very important issue. I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Casey, to share more about the work that PEN America is doing. But before I turn it to you, I'm a former high school social studies teacher. I taught in 2 different public schools, and I know firsthand how much students deserve access to stories that reflect their lived experiences, but also stories that are different from their own. And so thank you again for your work to stop book banning.
Thank you again, Congresswoman, for gathering us for this critical discussion on book bans and the importance of diverse and inclusive books in our schools and libraries. Also, what an incredible, roundtable that you've assembled. So just thank you for allowing PEN to be here. My name is Casey Meehan. I serve as the director for the Freedom to Read program at PEN America. PEN America stands at the intersection of literature and human rights in defending free expression in the United States and worldwide. Over the past few years, across the United States, we have witnessed alarming attacks on free expression, particularly the freedom to read. These attacks rely on authoritarian tactics of fear, intimidation, and silencing, straining and fostering mistrust in our public schools, and undermining our schools, educators, and librarians' ability to meet their goals of educating students with knowledge and critical thinking and facilitating the ongoing unification that undergirds a pluralistic society. Just this morning, we released a 2-year cumulative summary on book bans in schools over the last 2 years. Between July 2021 and June 2023, we recorded nearly 6,000 instances of book bans. These are books that have been removed from access across 41 states and 247 public school districts. These bans have affected nearly 3,000 unique titles and the professional works of over 2,500 creatives. Further, as shared, we know these bans have a particular pernicious effect on individuals from historically marginalized communities and identities. Authors whose books are targeted are most frequently female, people of color, and/or LGBTQ+ individuals, and banned books overwhelmingly depict stories by and about people of color and LGBTQ+ experiences or content related to sex and sexuality or racism. Those fighting against book bans ground our resistance in the love of books, as we've heard, and the deep belief that all students deserve access to literature that reflects their own lived experiences and identities, that introduces new ideas, concepts, experiences, and cultures, offering a gateway to understanding others, and that expands awareness and empathy necessary in navigating a diverse and pluralistic democracy. PEN America, alongside many of us here and many more national and local organizations, student groups, parents groups, teacher and librarian associations, authors, and publishers, have mounted a counter-effort to defend the rights of students and the freedom to read. Our response relies on 3 key strategies: increase public awareness to activate public will, support legislation that upholds principles of free expression, and challenge any legislation, policy, or practice that diminishes the freedom to read, learn, and write. We so appreciate your leadership, Congresswoman Pressley, and your team's leadership in introducing the Book Save Lives Act, and look forward to continued partnership with your office and those joining this roundtable in opposing book bans and standing up for students in their freedom to read. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And I think we did a pretty good job of sticking to time. Although I could talk about this all day. One of the through lines for me and why I wanted to introduce this legislation is that I find, when headlines fade, so too does the visibility of an issue and mobilization efforts. And I worry that the urgency around this is waning. And I want to challenge my siblings in the broader work of racial, gender, social justice, to see the intersectionality of this movement with the other fights. You know, very often we talk about that Venn diagram of the intersectionality of the states that have been the most active in triggered laws and banning abortion as health care are the same states that have been the most active in sowing the seeds of anti-blackness in their rhetoric and voter suppression policies, and the same states that have been the most transphobic and anti-LGBTQ in their rhetoric and in their laws and in their book bans. And so I will just put it to all of you. I've been trying to integrate into all my messaging the links between bans on our bodies, you know, our bodily autonomy, and the intellectual freedom and expression in our books. But I would just be curious as to all of you, you know, is the messaging breaking through? Is this the experience that I have that perhaps the commitment to this fight is waning in people understanding how it is connected to all of the other fights that we're in the midst of in this moment? Can folks just speak to that? Yes.
You know, I was thinking about this when getting ready to come here. The notion of what ideas can we come up with in this discussion. And one of the first ideas I came up with that we have to have a bill to put into Congress. And the fact that you did that is something that we should all do. Now is critical because, you know, you're going to have a 3-week break period, and then when you reconvene, there's going to be the election. And I think the Democrats are going to take the House again, so this would be the perfect time for this bill to be picked up and voted upon. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, I'm glad you said that because I believe in calls to action, so we'll be enlisting all of you in making sure that we get the co-sponsors necessary and keep momentum growing around the bill. But any other thoughts on public messaging and lessons learned so far in this fight, on what you've learned on effective public messaging, on the harms of book bans, and whether or not, you know, just opportunities within the broader fights?
I think that people just don't know about the fight all the time. It's just not in their awareness. We know from all the polling that's been done that more than 70% of all persons across all political persuasions oppose book ban. They understand the harms to our Constitution and our rights as citizens. It's just getting the message out to them and making them aware. Where we have supermajorities in states and in communities and things like that, it's hard sometimes to convince elected officials to not engage in the kind of legislation that targets appropriate individuals and librarians and educators. But I think that that's part of why we do the work we do with United Against Book Bans, through Florida Free to Read and Read with Love. That's raising awareness, and we really need to do that because we all need to remember that we still have a First and 14th Amendment, and they're truly powerful policy if they're enforced. And we are seeing success in the courts. We've had preliminary injunctions issued against bad laws in Texas and in Arkansas, and we're hoping to see further success in Iowa and in Alaska, where further suits have been so. But that's slow to work, and legislation or initiatives or messaging is important to reaching out to the people who are not aware of what's going on and to act.
Well, let me just, to that end, and then we'll pop over here, Patrick, and then we'll pick up down here, okay? So I always say policy is my love language, and that is, I'm not sure how my husband feels about that, but I always say that policy is my love language because every injustice is one that was codified in a budget or in a law. And so I do want to just lift up, and I'll close out with our bill, some of the other bills that are in the queue, because I agree that is one way that we keep this movement growing and we keep the momentum up is when people have an awareness of efforts federally, given the number of accomplices in banning books and co-conspirators from city halls to state legislatures. It is important that we have federal legislation. So there is the Right to Read Act by Congressman Grijalva, which would increase federal investment in literacy by reauthorizing the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grants. Okay, so that's the Right to Read Act. And then there is the Fight Book Bans Act by Congressman Frost. And this would fund school districts, this is what you were talking about, this exorbitant amount, to cover expenses on fighting book bans, including legal representation. And then, of course, there is our bill, the Book Save Lives Act, which would ensure that libraries nationwide maintain a diverse collection of books and classify, and I think this is really key and very smartly integrated into this by my legislative director, DeMarquin Johnson, who also got you all here today, so we thank him. But this would classify book bans as violations of federal civil rights laws. So I want to make sure that you're aware of the suite of legislative offerings that we have, and I've co-sponsored the other two bills, but just wanted to make you aware of the power of the pen that we are stewarding righteously in this fight as lawmakers. Okay, Patrick.
Yeah, so I think a lot of us talked about how bleak it is to see so many book bans happening. So I did kind of want to make sure that we also focused on the positives. I talked about Mindy in Pennsylvania. She lives in Bucks County. The Central Bucks County School Board was a school board that was very book ban happy for a couple of years there. But just this past November, that school board flipped to a pro-inclusive education majority. We saw that same trend in Iowa and Ohio and other parts of Pennsylvania, and I could go on and on. But I think the important thing to note is that when people hear things like book bans or censorship, things like that, they don't like it. When in history have the good guys ever been the ones banning books? So people think that, that sounds bad, and they don't want those things to be happening to their schools and their kids. So I think just keeping up the public debate around this, introducing bills, we had Congressman Raskin having hearings about this. Things of that nature are really, really important, and I think also just calling it what it is. These are book bans. This is censorship. Speaking clearly about these issues, I think really does get people engaged, and also letting them know, getting involved at your local level is really important. That is where all of this is happening. That is where people have to listen to you, because at most local government meetings, you got like 10 people in the room. So if you've got a couple of people who show up and are willing to talk about these things, I think that does make a world of difference, and I think we're starting to see that.
Well, first, Emily, I want to say we look forward to hosting you, so I'm sure we'll be doing some direct action, if you will, when you are in my district. And Patrick, I love this read-in, these read-ins that you've been doing. Is that the right way to characterize them?
Yeah, read with love-ins, we call
Okay,
it.
read with love-ins. Okay, all right. Well, put me in, Coach, okay?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, just don't have me like a story hour get on the ground because I might not be able to get back up. I am turning 50 in a couple of weeks. Okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, no, right here. Yeah. We're just going to go down the line. Okay.
So in Florida, we had the opportunity, a lot of districts actually asked their parents this year whether or not they wanted restrictions on access in the library. And we found in most cases, 99% of students were provided full access to their school libraries in our public schools in Florida. There were 3 or 4 districts that chose to make their libraries opt-in instead of opt-out. And in those districts, unfortunately, we have 30 to 40% of students still without access just because of parent inaction, not because parents have expressed.
I see. Okay.
And so we have worked really hard to bring parent awareness to the issue because we know largely parent support and trust. And I think they, the other side kind of gets the upper hand in the sense that most parents are going to send their kids to schools where they trust them to be in schools for 70 hours, right? And so they're trying to build up this trust, and we are trying to get the people that already trust to show up and do a little bit of extra work and to recognize the attacks that are happening right now on our it is turning. Unfortunately, we have a district, Charlotte, where in pre-K through 8, they said LGBTQ plus characters and themes cannot exist in our libraries. And that turned up, this is a very red county in the state, that turned up a lot of community standing up against that. They had over 100 people show up to their next school board meeting and say, that is just insane. We believe that every single student gets to see their family exist on the shelf. And that policy is, there's no way that policy can stand in the United States. Unfortunately, the district is still scared, and they're asking the state for guidance, they're not getting guidance, and they're thinking that they have to protect their teachers by not having those books on the shelves. So the district is still fighting it. But we're getting more and more people to show up. And so we are having success stories. We are working really hard to bring awareness, and it is just one parent at a time having the conversations and letting others know, because there is a narrative, a controlled media in our state, and so it does take community conversations and conversations with neighbors about this issue, and that's what we're working hard to do.
Excellent, and I do want to say how much I appreciate, sitting here with educators and authors and advocates and scholars, that you're lifting up every part of this in terms of the collateral damage and residual impact there. More often than not, I hear people framing the debate only on its impact on students, but not on authors, not on educators, not on librarians, and so I appreciate folks lifting that. I'll certainly make sure that I'm intentional about that in my messaging, and if there's more that people would like to add to that. I know we're also speaking with unions who represent librarians, and I did want to ask, since language does matter, you use the term media specialist, so I want to make sure that I'm being respectful. So can you just speak to the difference, and I just want to make sure that I'm being accurate. Okay.
So in our school libraries, most of the people that have certified media specialist degrees are, they have the LMS degree, library media science, but they're also assigned many other duties. One of those is the individual computers and all of the computer training. A lot of the testing goes on in the media center, and so the terminology is the same. They are librarians.
Okay.
Who have that certification, but they also have additional duties of managing all the computer software.
Okay.
The American Association of School Librarians, which is a division of ALA, actually prefers the term certified school librarian.
Certified school librarian. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you very much.
I did want to add one more point
Well,
to the policy. We have to remember that the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights is now investigating book bans and
That's right.
hostile educational environment, and that Notion Shop has recently been appointed to supervise that work at the DOE. So we have, and I will just tell you from my personal observation, it has a real impact on getting the attention of school boards when they find out that they're being investigated.
Yes, again, giving voice to the fear that educators are carrying and the threats to their livelihood. Again, that's a part of this narrative that I don't think has been given enough oxygen. But no, we're going right down the line.
And I wanted to continue on Stefana's point, which is that not only parental is the parents not really invested as much as they'd like. I go to areas all over the country to speak to schools, to parents, to librarians, educators. And in every place I've gone, somebody has stood up and said, well, I mean, you're not wrong. We don't want porn in elementary school. So I think that we have a truly a big problem with misinformation because they're just buying into the rhetoric that's being put out there. And they're not trying to find out more information. So, we have to fight back with facts. We have to have these discussions. So I have to open that discussion up every time with the parents group and say, well, but that's not what's happening. Let's actually talk about what's happening, when they're banning books, when they're, soft censoring. So we have to have a broader national conversation on that. Because, I'm one person, I can't go everywhere.
Yeah.
I try.
I know, but we thank you for your visionary leadership in establishing We Deserve Diverse Books in 2014, right?
Yes.
Okay, so a long time.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
But again, it's a conversation, and the misinformation is really hard to fight, as Stefan was saying.
Yes, well, I've actually heard from parents myself who have said Democrats have lost me on this issue because, I don't want the schools saying that my kid has to read this book. And I've had to remind them of the same. You have not lost your parental rights or autonomy. Parents are still their child's first teacher.
So to play on that and to say several things really quickly though, what happens is that they will pull one word or one line from a book. My book is 200 pages long. There is one point in which this trans girl is taking a bath, and she is in a bubble bath, and she is unhappy with what she sees bobbing in the water. That's it. That's it. But they will take that and pull it and turn it into this book is pornographic because of the thing that got mentioned. And they are combing through to find that thing in a way that they're not doing on other books. They pinpoint it because of the content and then find the justification. And then turn that justification into the whole thing, forgetting that you can only judge what a piece of art is as a whole. You have to look at where that is in context. Very quickly, we are fighting, we are often trying to fight with logic, people who are being non-logical. People are fearful of their kids knowing something that they don't, or not knowing something that and I know this is hard to say, and people don't love when I say this, they don't actually believe that a parent deserves what a parent gets to say what a kid can read. I believe actually in that child's autonomy, because a queer child in a queer phobic home, that parent is going to say that kid doesn't deserve to read, it shouldn't be reading this book, and that to me is dangerous. So I understand why it gets said, and I also feel like it's a logical concession to a non-logical argument. What I will say
Fair
is
enough.
messaging,
Fair enough.
real fast.
Yeah, tell me.
I like to say bans and challenges, because bans sound like it happened on high. A challenge is some schlomo who isn't a certified librarian going into the space and asking for books to be banned.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I also wanted to just, I'm not sure, I don't recall who said it, but there was a talk of the fact that, did we say publishing is cyclical? Okay, so I just wonder if someone could speak to how the banning of books impacts the production of more books from underrepresented communities.
We're already hearing about creators who are not being allowed to get their next book deal because they are writing content that's LGBTQ or about racism. And there's pushback now. Publishing takes 2-3 years to get books out, especially picture books and comic books. They take even longer. So all the bans that are happening now that are affecting what publishing sees as sales, because it is, it's affecting sales, it's affecting books that get promotion. Bans are dangerous for authors because it's not, this whole, fallacy of book bans are good for sales is actually not true. What happens is, especially for marginalized creators, their books do not get marketed, they do not get promoted, they do not get read or seen, and that author can no longer get a livable.
To piggyback quickly on
Yes,
what
please.
Ellen has said, just a couple months ago, Scholastic kind of capitulated a little bit with the book banning situation, and there was a big pushback, particularly on social media, and I think then they backtracked again. So they were really going to capitulate to these book banners and challengers and not put out certain books and deny writers their contracts and things of that nature. So it's getting really dicey, just like what's happening with the presidents of the universities, where students have been protesting the war and calling the ceasefire and all that stuff, and how they're pushing to get these presidents who testified truthfully, before Congress, with illogical people, interrogating them in a sense, they're losing their jobs. So it's like this weird, they're using the reins of cancel culture weirdly now against the progressives and liberal-minded folks and stuff.
Can I
And I
add?
think Scholastic is falling to that.
Yeah, I'll just
just going to add for Tony, and I think in some ways it connects back to the messaging piece too, because, Florida Freedom to Read Project, ALA, Penn, like we have been counting, and book bans we can count because it's bellwether. But there's something so much deeper happening, and it's affecting publishers, it's affecting educators, it's affecting those who are making curricula decisions, it's affecting school board members, and in some ways it's the thing that's like hard to quantify, but it's like pervasive. And when we talk about messaging, I think that's the piece that is almost hardest to talk to. Like we can point to the number of books that are being removed, but it's harder to put a very concise, kind of compelling message as to like this deeper coordinated effort to just undermine public schools, to undermine public institutions more broadly. I mean, we know that's happening. And I think that's the piece that I think, is kind of as the field keeps shifting, as the playbook keeps changing, I think this piece around like, what comes next? It's like a deeper, more self-censoring, soft-censoring, harder to track and point to movement that we're now up against. So I don't know, how do we message against that? But I think in some ways it's like, we've thought a little bit about folks in Florida, like, a campaign that's like, we are your public school teachers. We are your librarians. We are your public schools. Like, why is there so much distress being put on these institutions and these individuals? But I think like a voice from, a federal voice on that could be quite helpful.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I want to make sure we pop to the other side. We're going to popcorn back and forth. Okay, go ahead, Jeff, and then we'll come back here. Okay,
I
Laura.
want to second everything that's been said about the effect on the market in comics. The author of Again Before My Kobe said the amazing thing about graphic novels is that they give everyone the ability to depict themselves the way they want to be seen. They can show themselves the way they want to be seen. But we live in an environment now where through the book ratings bill that we're challenging now in Texas, and through court trials, and district attorneys threatening to throw people in jail, where the message is being sent to librarians, teachers, publishers, retailers, that if we allow this to enter the marketplace, if we allow this to enter the public square, we're putting people at risk. Publishers at risk. They could lose access to the marketplace. They could lose access to major networks of schools and libraries. And we're even seeing this impact online, where the algorithms are being weighted against certain things. And so if you have people saying that any depiction of LGBTQ content, any depiction of civil rights content related to race and other topics is too controversial, too problematic, they're just mass flagging this stuff. And so the algorithms get weighted to make sure that this stuff isn't seen. So I think it's important, extremely important, not just for the activists, but I think for everybody, for pastors and plumbers, your programmers, everybody who cares about expression, everybody who cares about kids, to see that something needs to be done and that they can make a difference.
Thank you. Yes, Laura.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Azar said about the international context and how much this is rooted in authoritarian forces. And in our work at PEN America around the world with writers who are at risk or imprisoned, we see that that this is an anti-democratic force and a tactic that many authoritarian governments use. And so it's not new, but we're seeing what's happening in the US being exported to other countries. So the same books that are being banned in Tennessee or Florida are now being banned in various countries in Europe as well, right? So it's not just unique to the US context. We're seeing it across the world. And I think just on the messaging piece, this is an attack on the freedom to learn, the freedom to read, the freedom to write, to think. And these freedoms are inherent to our country and our democracy. And so I think that framing is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Okay.
Can I find just a very quick point?
Okay, yes, and then we'll go
incredibly,
back to...
just a very quick point. There are a number of countries, I used to work in civil rights and democratic reform in Russia. There are a number of countries around the world that see LGBTQ content, other types of content related to civil rights, as a threat to public order. And they're putting pressure on internet platforms, on publishers, to keep that content out, not just in their own countries, but around the world. So your point there is incredibly important. That's something we really do have.
Azar? Yes.
Well, first of all, I wanted to ask you, there's a problem that I keep grappling with before going to what you say, and that is it takes a huge effort not to become like your enemy, not to become like them, you know. And almost on a daily basis, as soon as I turn on Morning Joe, I get into that mode, you know. And one of the reasons we all get into that mode is that there's not another alternative. That, you know, there was talk about this national discourse. We need to do something as a nation. And we need to bring these arguments that were brought in here today to America as a nation, because I no more know what is American. What does it mean to be an American? I don't know anything. You know, if you have any ways of dealing with this, I would appreciate you saying it. And you mentioned about the international world. I learned. I'm so grateful to the Islamic Republic. You won't believe it. These reactionaries make you understand what you. I mean, they made me understand how important it was for me to be able to walk down the street, lick an ice cream, without being arrested. You know, so the Islamic Republic has taught me that they can eliminate you. One, they can eliminate you physically, but they can also eliminate you through making you like them, become like them. That is what I learned from the Islamic Republic. And, you know, being a migrant has been very helpful because I look at my new country through the eyes of the old. And I see things that I might not have seen had I been a citizen of this country. I mentioned in my book, Reading Lolita in Tehran, of how when the world was taken away from us, we came to the world through reading their books, listening to their music. These were their golden ambassadors. We criticized America, as we do now, and at the end of Reading Lolita, I talk about how dangerous it is for my students to idealize America. But at the same time, we connected to it through the best it had to offer. And the best you have to offer is your culture, is this, the bloody Langston Hughes that I love so much.
Thank you.
I only like James Baldwin a little bit more.
Okay. Well, I do. Yes.
I think we need to learn from the world as the world learns from us. One of the most insulting things that has happened to me in this country is I talk about the situation of women in the Islamic Republic, like getting girls married at the age of 9 being the law. And somebody gets up and says, but it's their culture, and you are Westernized. So all the good things are Western. Western people love to be free. They like to go into the street the way they want to. They like to listen to music. But living in Iran, I don't want these things. But if I do want these things, I am a Westernized entity. We need to look at the world the way we look at ourselves. That's why we need literature, for empathy and for curiosity.
That's right. I do want to be respectful of folks' time. Does anyone have any final thoughts before I close out? Yes.
I did just want to add, our Attorney General made a very scary argument about a week and a half ago in court, maybe last week, They could remove a book written by a Democrat simply because it's written by a Democrat. And if the people took issue with it, they could take that up at the next opportunity to vote. And that argument, along with putting aside the Miller test, that takes the entire work as a whole, Alex's point, and discussing amongst a community what is the standard. We now have the government setting the standard for what is and is not appropriate. We're taking books out of context into its parts and its pieces, and now we have a government that's making the argument that they can eliminate any topic as it seems fit from our access. And so I just wanted to put that out there because I don't think it got enough attention when it was made in a court in Florida. But that is something that calls into question, and it makes this a nonpartisan issue. This is fundamentally attacking our First Amendment rights, and it's scary, and more people need to get attention.
And I want to acknowledge that one of the other hats I wear is as executive director of the Freedom to Read Foundation. And we are filing an amicus briefs in our able to address that argument directly. And I want to note that with some bravery, some 21 law school professors filed an amicus brief in Florida, challenging the idea that public libraries are intended to be centers of indoctrination rather than education. And we'll continue to fight that fight and file those briefs and all the litigation across the country. It was Judge Brooks in Arkansas who said that libraries are not an arm of the state. They are of the people, and they are intended for the people to be a marketplace of ideas, for everyone to freely choose what they want to read for themselves and make up their own mind about their lives. And I think we need to elevate Judge Brooks' decision in Arkansas as a really starting point for this conversation.
May I say one last thing? From our, for reading diverse books, we believe that children's books teach empathy. That is the heart of how we can broaden minds, especially children's minds. And when we don't call what is happening what it really is, which is prejudice, bias, racism, homophobia, transphobia, we don't say those words, we're letting them win. So let's put it on the table. That is what we are fighting.
Well, I agree. Their efforts are coordinated and blunt, and we should be just as blunt and just as vigilant and unrelenting. I will take a moment of congressional privilege, as it were, to close out with a poem. I mentioned, well, perhaps I didn't, but I grew up in a single-parented household. My father, who is a published author today and a former professor of journalism, but prior to that was incarcerated for much of my life. And he sent me faithfully letters that I did not read, but every book he sent me I did. And one of the first assignments that I was given, as it were, from behind the wall from my father was to learn the poem Harlem by Langston Hughes. And so as an ode, given our love of Langston, I do want to just close with that poem. Harlem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore, and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Thank you.